It's actually happening. Reports are starting to pick up that the Milwaukee Bucks are targeting Bradley Beal, that Bradley Beal is willing to waive his no move clause to come to the Bucks, and this new report has proposed a trade that has Bucks fans livid and just confused. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage you aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. This is the place to be for daily Bucks news. As the deadline is approaching, we're going to be uploading multiple times a day, keeping you guys up to date. But ladies and gentlemen, I made a video last night specifically surrounding Pat Connaughton and how they were willing to trade him and how the Suns made a trade, obviously their first-round pick, in order to get 3 current first-round picks to trade for Jimmy Butler. And then right after that video, or a bit later on in the night, reports are starting to swirl surrounding not Jimmy Butler to Milwaukee, but Bradley Beal to Milwaukee. And things are crazy. So it first came out, the report that Bradley Beal is open to waiving his no trade clause to join the Bucks. Now we know that Bradley Beal has a no trade clause. We know that he, is willing to move it or waive it for some teams, not all teams, but for some teams. And as you start to look now at what this means for the Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, man, oh man, things are starting to get a little bit interesting, right? Because you think about it from the perspective of Bradley Beal. He's willing to waive his no move clause. Of course, I mean, it's not working out in Phoenix. Now, from the Bucks' perspective, you were thinking, okay, well, just because he's open to waiving the no move clause, why would the Bucks help facilitate a trade for Phoenix to get, to take on Bradley Beal's contract, all these different things? And then you get this report. And it is a interesting one. One scenario that 2 league sources told Clutch Points about involves Butler going to Phoenix, Milwaukee moving out of the second apron by moving Pat Connaughton to Toronto. So that's what I said in a video yesterday. Of course, they moved Pat Connaughton to Toronto, and then you of course are able then to get under the the cap or whatever, the apron, second apron that is. This then turns into Bruce Brown and Chris Middleton to Miami, Beal and Love to Milwaukee, and Portis/Connaughton to Toronto. Draft picks would obviously be going to Miami and Toronto. So Toronto takes on a bunch of salary. They get picks. Miami gets picks for Jimmy Butler from Phoenix and supposedly, maybe Milwaukee. I highly doubt it, though. So basically, the trade ends up being, from Milwaukee's side of things, Chris Middleton, Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis for Kevin Love and Bradley Beal, which is interesting. Now, whether or not picks go out from Milwaukee's side, like I wouldn't assume, you're basically moving, in air quotes, stars around at this point. Now, Chris Middleton hasn't played well. Miami would be getting Bruce Brown, Chris Middleton, and some picks, 3 firsts, I would assume. So, I mean, this is just beyond me. Now, we can dive into it. And let me know down below, would you even do this deal? Would you consider this deal if you're the Milwaukee Bucks? That's where things get a little bit interesting here. There's some chatter around. My thoughts on the Bucks trade line. I'm good if they get Jimmy Butler. I'm good if they don't get Jimmy Butler. I'm not good with getting Bradley Beal if there's no additional assets. I'm not good with standing pat. Like in this move, this hypothetical, that the report from Brett Siegel, it doesn't seem like the Bucks are getting any assets in order for taking Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal, ladies and gentlemen, is making $50 million. And there's another report here from Evan Sittery, a different reporter. There's some buzz building around a Jimmy Butler trade framework that includes the Heat, Suns, Bucks, and probably the Raptors. Phoenix would receive Jimmy Butler. Milwaukee would receive Bradley Beal. Miami would receive Chris Middleton. Facilitator takes down the salary. Now, in the deal that was proposed originally, of course, you're giving up Bobby Portis. You get Kevin Love back as your backup 4 or whatever you want to place him as. But the big talk here now is Bradley Beal. Now, we know reports came out yesterday surrounding Pat Connaughton. And when I made this video and I was discussing how Pat Connaughton, would put them under the second apron, it would make sense for them to do this in a bigger move, right? And that's what it seems like their plan is. And again, I mean, I'm almost at a loss for words because I never expected the Bucks to be in on Bradley Beal. I was a bit surprised that Bradley Beal is willing to waive his no move clause or his no trade clause. And you think back to 2023, the Bucks were a finalist to get him from the Wizards. And, I mean, it's lucky they didn't, at least in theory, because he hasn't worked out in the Suns. Now, when you're talking about Bradley Beal, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Bradley Beal is a very solid player, but he's been injury-prone. He hasn't scored the ball well. He's been very efficient, though, this year. Bradley Beal hasn't played more than 60 games in a season since, almost 7 years ago. Just keep Chris if this is the other option. At least he is good and has chemistry when he plays. I'd be willing to part with Middleton for Butler or even Levine, but I couldn't be more against Beal. Genuinely feels like a fireable offense. So this is where the question comes up. And this is where I ask you guys, let me know your thoughts. Would you trade, basically you're swapping Chris Middleton for Bradley Beal? Because A, do you think this would make the team better? And B, do you think that it even makes sense for the Milwaukee Bucks to do? Because one, you're losing Chris Middleton. Now, Chris Middleton's been okay this season. He started to play off the bench a little bit, but he has chemistry with Giannis, right? And that's the big thing you have to think about here is the chemistry. Now, when it comes to an efficiency standpoint, Bradley Beal has been very good this season. He's averaging 17 points a game, shooting 48.5% from the field and 38.6% from three. So an above average shooter, a very solid three-point shooter, an on-ball creator, very similar to Chris Middleton. I would say that he's a bit less turnover prone, but also isn't quite as good at facilitating. And when you look at where he'd factor in, you'd assume if they trade for Bradley Beal, then he would be the shooting guard. So you'd have Dame, Bradley Beal, Taurean Prince, Giannis, and Brook Lopez. So, I mean, you have a big three of Dame, Beal, and Giannis, all kind of aging, all not necessarily. I mean, Bradley Beal's 31 years old, Damian Lillard, 30s as well. And as they all approach their mid-30s, obviously Lillard now, I believe, is 34. So as they're all approaching, their age and things like that, it's going to start to get very interesting. So that's the biggest thing. And I think from a perspective of chemistry, it might not work great. If the Bucks think, hey, our team isn't good enough to win the championship and they want to try and play some upside, I think Beal has more upside than Chris Middleton. Beal at his peak is an elite scorer, like one of the best in the league, averaging 30 points a game with Washington. Can he get back to that? Probably not. Now, Chris Middleton at his peak was also extremely good, an okay defender as well. And that's where the question mark comes in, right? Now, Beal has been fairly, decent this season. Again, he doesn't score as much. He's not as efficient. Doesn't turn over the ball a ton. And again, he started to come off the bench for the Suns, and they're trying to move him. I think ultimately, if they make this deal, I'm not exactly sure how much it helps the team. People aren't happy about it. Jimmy Butler, there's some buzz about Zach LaVine. We'll have a video on that. But a big thing with him is health, but also you're getting rid of Chris Middleton, who's also one of his big problems is health. You're looking at the games that Bradley Beal has played over the past few seasons. 30 so far this year, 53 last year, 50 the year before, 40 the year before. So he hasn't necessarily been super durable, right? And that's one of the biggest things. However, you look at Chris Middleton, this season 18, last season 55, the year before 33. So they've been pretty similar when it comes to durability. It's just a matter of who would you rather? Would you rather the chemistry with Middleton off the bench or potential higher upside in Bradley Beal? I mean, this season, Chris Middleton's averaging 12 points a game. Beal's averaging around 17. Stats aren't everything, obviously. And that's the thing. And some people might even argue that Beal doesn't even have as much upside as Middleton. I think he does. I think Beal's 2 years younger. He's been a number one option before, albeit on a Washington Wizards team. You can maybe argue in his prime, John Wall was the number one option. That being said, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. This is blowing up. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. I think ultimately there's a chance this deal gets done. I think Pat Connaughton gets moved off. They go into the second apron regardless. When it comes to you're also getting rid of Bobby Portis here, who's a big bench piece. You're getting back Kevin Love. That fit between Love and Bobby Portis is also kind of interesting. You're kind of swapping. I mean, Love is not the player he used to be, but he is a veteran. You'd really be going with veterans. And this season, Love's averaging like 6 points a game. So you'd be losing some scoring there as well. And you'd have to rely on some of the other guys to step up, or maybe they make another trade with their draft picks, because in this scenario, you're keeping your first and second round picks. So let me know down below what your thoughts are. Things are picking up. We're going to keep you up to date with all the latest news. So make sure to smash that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.